Today on the Think Wildlife podcast, we are joined by Oishinee Chakraborty from the Kuddle Life Foundation. We discuss the role of artificial reefs for the conservation and restoration of marine ecosystems. We also talk about the work Kuddle Life Foundation is doing in marine ecosystems near Pondicherry. Do tune in to learn about this young organization. So, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Anish. It's nice to be on this podcast.
So how did the Cuddle Life sorry, I'm suffering in. How did the Cuddle Life Foundation come into being and what is the long-term vision at the organization?
Right. So, Kuddle Life Foundation started in August 2020, and it was actually established by Mr. Punit Dhandhania. He's not a marine biologist, he doesn't have a marine background, but then he has friends around him who have always been involved in some sort of marine conservation project or are super enthusiastic about trying to help the oceans in any way, shape, form possible. In fact, his son Hans Dhandhania, who's also one of the main persons for Kuddle Life Foundation, is a dive professional and does all he can to kind of help in marine conservation. Well, the initial idea for Cuddle Life was not for it to become very big. It was just to maybe formalize all of the smaller marine conservation projects or stuff that his friends were doing or his son wanted to do. And then it kind of became something much, much bigger because in Pondicherry, a very formal institute that works on marine conservation is a bit lacking. And Cuddle Life Foundation started filling that role. So that's how Cuddle Life Foundation started becoming a little bit bigger. And in terms of the long-term goals for Cuddle Life is obviously to kind of scale up and have like a local and national impact, which is quantifiable. So the idea is basically to have most of our work be community based and make sure that all of the different people who can contribute to conservation, like say the government sector or divers or scientists or fishermen, they can come together at one point and can help however they can to in terms of helping the oceans. Now, at this point, what we are working with is CSR funds. So CSR funds basically are mostly given to education and health enhancements. But the small amount that is kind of given to the environmental aspect is mostly land based. And what we are doing with Cuddle Life is kind of utilizing these funds to go out in the oceans and help with habitat restoration through artificial reefs or say mangrove restoration. So yes, maybe in 10 years, what we would love is for this organization to grow at a national scale.
So one of your most prominent initiatives is the Artificial Reef Program. What exactly are artificial reefs and how do they differ from natural reefs?
Yes. So before I even talk about artificial reefs, I would just like to say that in a natural setting in the ocean, one of the most limiting factors is space. So even on a natural reef, most of the competition kind of happens to find hard space to be able to grow. So now what is happening is with all the climate change and the loss of habitats, there's a there's a reduction in the amount of space that is available for all of these tiny, tiny larval forms to kind of settle on. Now, artificial reefs is something that supplements that or kind of mimics natural coral reefs or hard structures. So it could be made concrete or steel or other eco-friendly materials. It provides stable surface and complexity for all of these smaller larval forms to kind of attach and grow into a bigger community. So artificial reefs work as that. And natural reefs are something which grow over thousands and thousands of years. They are built by not just like one, I mean, not just when you talk about corals, there's a lot of other tax that is available on natural reefs. So it could be sponges, it is, soft corals, you have sea fans. All of these together make up an entire natural reef. Now, natural reefs could not only be say coral reefs, there are other reefs which are just sponge gardens or deep sea ecosystems. So these are formed over thousands and thousands of years, and we are kind of missing out on some of these things. Artificial reefs is something that helps mimic a little bit of the hard substrate that helps all of these marine organisms to kind of form a community. So that's how artificial reefs are different from natural reefs, or kind of similar to natural reefs, I'd say.
So how does so talk about science behind artificial reefs. What is the process of establishing the artificial reefs?
Right. So for artificial reef establishment, one of the key things that we need to look at is first community engagement. What we do is we kind of approach a fishing village, multiple fishing villages. We give them awareness campaigns. We do a lot of these outreach programs so they know what artificial reefs are and how it is going to be beneficial for them to have an artificial reef for their own village. So the first step in artificial reef establishment is to talk to the community, make them aware of what artificial reefs are and how it is going to benefit them. Then the second aspect is we kind of ask the fishermen, now that they know what artificial reefs are, we ask them to show us areas which they think would be best for them to have the artificial reef at. So we go out with fishermen, they show us a couple of sites, then we go out as scientists to kind of do certain work and evaluate the feasibility of that site to be a potential artificial reef area. So what we look at is basically the seabed topography, the hardness of the sediment, look at different sediment and water quality parameters, and also look at the existing biodiversity of that area. So that's the next step. Now, once we've done that, now we have a site that we have selected. Next step is for us to actually make those artificial reef modules. Now, designing and fabricating these artificial reef modules, for us, it's largely inspired by CMFRI, who have kind of pioneered this in India. But what we do is we kind of look at the local scenario, see what is actually available for that particular area, and then kind of design these modules and fabricate them. Now, once these modules are made, the next step for us is again to go back to the community and have them help us in terms of deploying these artificial reef modules. Now, one artificial reef, whenever I talk about it, we are looking at almost 200 to 260 modules that we deploy. So one module is almost, say, about a meter high and almost 500 to 700 kgs in weight. So we kind of get help from the community, and they are the ones who go out into the ocean with help from us and deploy these artificial reef units. Now, once we have deployed the reefs, our job is not done. For an artificial reef to kind of reach maturity, it takes about 5 to 10 years. Now, our goal after that is to constantly monitor these reefs to understand what is the biodiversity enhancement capability of that reef, and also kind of see if sustainable fishing practices are being taken up by the fishermen and how it is benefiting. There's a lot of long-term monitoring that we do after that. This is the whole process of establishing an artificial reef.
So how effective have artificial reefs been not only in India but around the world in reviving marine biodiversity, especially compared to natural reefs? What about socioeconomic benefits?
Right. So what I would says compared to natural reefs, artificial reefs are only just second or third best. There's nothing that we can compare to natural reefs. However, given the situation, what we are looking at is before artificial reefs were deployed and after artificial reefs were deployed, we have seen that there is an increase in biodiversity. So that from in the context of our Pondicherry reef, before moving on to the global scenario, let's say, we've seen that there's improvement in water quality. So almost 20% increase in the dissolved oxygen levels that we have looked at. We've also seen that chlorophyll and plankton density has increased around our artificial reefs. And in terms of fishes, there's been almost 4 times the amount of fishes which are found after deployment of artificial reefs. Even now, we are kind of doing a lot of post assessment surveys where we are adding to these species. So there's a positive increase in the amount of biodiversity that an artificial reef is accumulating over the years. And in terms of fisheries impact, what we look at is right now we have around 20 artisanal fishing boats that go out to the Pondicherry artisanal artificial site every day. And then daily earnings have almost doubled. Like from 5,000, they're getting almost 10,000 per day. Now, most the artificial reefs that we've deployed, they're below, they're always deployed about, say, less than 5 kilometers from the shore. So for fishermen, when in a natural setting without an artificial reef, they're going out further from the seashore to fish. So they're expending a lot of money on fuel and then expending a lot of money to kind of come back. Now that has been cut in half because our deployments are less than 5 kilometers. So they're going out to smaller distances. So their fuel consumption rates have decreased. And this is also since artificial reefs require certain sustainable fishing practices. So we are seeing a trend where fishermen are kind of switching to hooks and lines and other sustainable methods of fishing rather than going for more destructive fishing methods. And we have like a success story where one person almost caught 10 lakhs worth of fish in just 1 week of fishing at a reef. Now, in the global context, artificial reefs have also done a lot. The scenario is almost similar to what we are looking at in the Pondicherry situation.
So, what are some of the other initiatives of the foundation?
All right. So at the foundation, we have basically, we can talk about it in terms of two broad things. So we have community-based projects that are ongoing, and then we have academic and research-based projects that are ongoing. But we do a lot of learning camps, a lot of educational programs where school students, university kids, interns who come in with tourists that we end up doing. And then we have all of these other research, small research projects where interns come to us. They do maybe. So we also, one thing I did not talk about before is Kuddle Life also has a for-profit wing, which is basically a scuba diving center. So sometimes interns come to us, get their diving licenses while doing marine research projects. So we have marine litter survey programs, we have bycatch programs that we are doing. So these are some of the other initiatives that we have also kind of been looking at in Kuddle Life.
So, what have been some of the most pressing challenges you have faced at the foundation, and what about some of the favorite memories from your conservation career?
Oh. So in terms of challenges, I think it is the same for all NGOs. The idea of getting support, the struggle to get support for doing the work that you want to do. And this could be in the form of, say, funds from donors or permission from the government, or even the blessings per se from the community to do the work that we want to do. So that that is something that is always challenging because you need to create awareness about the work that you want to do. And then once you create that awareness amongst these different groups, it is getting that support becomes is not a very quick process. Marine conservation is not quick. It is a very slow and tedious process which takes us time to achieve the end goal that we want to achieve. But then the real time cost that we as an NGO incurs is always different from the end term goals that we are kind of achieving. So there's always a balancing act of kind of say paying out salaries or getting the required funds or getting the required permissions and then actually doing the work that they're doing and giving some solid outcome to it. So that's definitely one of the challenges that I would say. And in terms of say some of my favorite memories for conservation, oh wow, there's so many. So, but then it's always like one thing that always sparks my interest or kind of validates my need to be a marine conservationist is when I'm able to see that spark in another person, in a student or in a college kid or in a tourist, and they're like, oh wow, I did not know about it. Tell me more. How can I help with this? That is always very, very satisfying to hear. In fact, I like we had the privilege of kind of going to one of these engineering colleges, and there were kids who came up with like, I know we don't have the background that is required for, say, marine biology, but how can we help? And then they actually sat down and they kind of tried to come up with programs that we could design or they could code that would help us with our research work. So yes, so these are some of the stories that kind of inspire me to keep going with my conservation.
So, how can individuals contribute to the Kuddle Life Foundation?
Right. So now with Cuddle Life, we have again we you can do two things. We have in water programs and then we have out of water programs. With our with Cuddle Life having a dive center, one of the main things that we have been able to achieve is give marine scientists the tools that they need to do research underwater. And that is something that you can help with. If you are a dive professional, if you are somebody who wants to make a difference for the oceans, we're always looking for people who would come and help us to do the work that needs to be done. It could be as simple as helping us steer our coast flats or doing the underwater surveys that needs to be done from our internal projects. Or if you're somebody who's never gone into the ocean or wants to learn or wants to get their licenses or wants to be able to do research, you can always come down and you can get your diving license and at the same time be trained by the Kuddle Life Foundation scientists to be able to do marine research, execute it, and get able to do that. And then we have out of water activities. Now, in terms of marine conservation, it's not always in water. 80% of the job that we do is out of water. There's a lot of data that we generate, and we need help in terms of analyzing that data or data crunching. We need people to help us with that. There is, we have these volunteer programs where you can come and help us contribute to the small projects like we have again the marine litter survey, the bycatch survey, the ghost net removal survey. These are certain volunteer programs that we have at the foundation that you can be a part of and become ocean ambassadors.
So, that is the final question I have for you today. Thank you so much for taking time out for this.
Thank you so much, Anish. It was great being on the podcast.